Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a consciousness guide and counselor. She has a master's degree in Somatic Psychology and is a Certified Hakomi Practitioner. She has been weaving the healing potential of expanded states of consciousness and psychology together in her practice for over 30 years. She met her first teacher in San Francisco, who was a pioneer exploring the intersection of Indigenous healing and psychotherapy. She later met her teacher of the last 20 years, an Indigenous Mazatec woman leading healing ceremonies with sacred mushrooms in the high mountains of southern Mexico. Drawing from years of close apprenticeship with her Mazatec teacher, as well as training in other Indigenous traditions, she has developed a comprehensive approach that bridges Western and Indigenous modalities for healing and growth. She trains therapists and facilitators, teaches at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and lectures internationally. Welcome to the show, FRANÇOISE BOURZA.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
How did I do with the pronunciation? I felt that was close.
Yeah, that was great. That was wonderful.
Good. Well, I'm glad we practiced at the beginning. You know,
yes.
I was lucky to be gifted your book, and it's amazing. I haven't been able to get all the way through it, but I've kind of gone through the chapters and picked up things here and there. Your research is intense, and you have such experience. So do you want to give the people who don't know you a little bit about your background and how long you've been really just bridging these worlds together? It's really amazing.
Thank you. Yes, I came to this country in 1981 at the age of 25. And soon after met some very interesting people who were both counselors and using expanded state of consciousness for their work as counselors, including breath work and rituals of Native American origin. They were Native American people themselves, expressive arts, and they were using psychedelics. And at the time, some of them are still legal. You know, MDMA was legal. So, you know, in this little community of people exploring their own growth and their own healing, I was able to partake in those ceremonies, in those sessions. What interested me in this framework was the way the leader was really intersecting rituals and sacred ceremony with an intelligence that was based in psychotherapeutic language and knowledge, and that really interested me. Later on, a few years later, I was able to meet my teacher of 20 years, this Mazatec woman involved in mushroom work in her indigenous traditional framework, and have been studying with her and her family for the last over 20 years now. And it's been really interesting to see how these worlds are very different, but in some way very similar. And my attempt over the years as a counselor and as a ceremony person has been to create some kind of not a fusion, because some kind of bridge between those two practices, and to connect them so they can draw from each other, learn from each other, and benefit from each other as well.
That's amazing. Well, there's so many different avenues I want to go with this, and I hope that you pick and choose what you think will be the most beneficial. But I'm curious, like the most important lessons that you learned studying with the Indigenous cultures, and maybe if there's multiple cultures that you studied with, I'd love for you to share what those are and what you've learned, and then diving into psychedelics and entheogens, because I think it's a huge topic now. And I just was speaking at an online psychedelic conference, and I think it was very important. But my talk was about how I wasn't like I've used them and they've been helpful, but now it's kind of been watered down, and there's not the same ceremony, there's not the same respect, there's not maybe proper use of these things. So I'm just curious if you wanted to touch in on any of that and what you've seen and what you've learned and what you think right now about any of that.
Great. So what seems to be really meaningful and valuable for me, learning from these indigenous practices, is their relationship with nature and their relationship with spirit, which is, of course, part of their gift to us, the people who live in more industrialized world. I feel like their using the medicine as a practice, as a spiritual practice, as a sacred practice of communing with the spirit or touching a vast space of consciousness, and yet at the same time being so connected with the natural land, having practices that are really profoundly animistic in terms of their it's a very native, it's very First Nation people really thinking that everything is sacred, everything has a spirit, everything is holy. So the land is holy, the tree is holy, the rocks are holy, the rain is holy. And their engagement with the natural world is quite different from what we have here. We go to nature, but they have a whole relationship with nature spirits, and they do offerings, and they use nature for cleansing, you know, brushing their body with plants, and they have they burn the sap of the tree or the leaves to cleanse themselves in the room and to prepare the sacred mushroom. They have a whole interface with nature that is quite different from what we do here, what we have. So I think that there's a lot of this sacred dimension of using these plants that's very beneficial for us, and the relationship with nature. I agree with what you say, you know, in this expansion of this curiosity and practices with psychedelic nowadays, and all the books written about it, and this research that's happening. The danger, in my opinion, is the possibility of losing sight of the sacred aspect of this use of these entheogens and psychedelics, and using them more in a medicalized, scientific, lab research platforms, which have a lot of validity, of course, but also they are losing what's lost in translation for me, I feel sometimes, is the holistic, sacred, natural aspect of this practice. So part of my narrative nowadays in this world, in this culture of psychedelics, is to really remind people that, you know, before the psychedelics were in a lab, they were in nature, in practices with indigenous people, and that's something for us to remember and draw from and not lose sight of.
Beautiful. I love that answer. And what I want to get straight into is, you know, right in your book, you know, it's a great title: Consciousness Medicine, Indigenous Wisdom, Entheogens, and Expanded States of Consciousness for Healing and Growth. And I would love for you, with your background in, you know, psychotherapy and healing and things like that, what's your definition of expanded states? And is it necessarily that we need an entheogen, that could be a possibility, or are there other ways that we can reach these expanded states to have more healing or more awareness to move forward?
The idea of an expanded state is sort of a very ancient practice. It's a very ancient practice. People have been doing expanded states forever. As far as back as we see humanity, there has been rituals, there has been drumming, there has been dancing, there has been practices of different kinds. You know, we come from a society where rituals, initiation, and coming together as communities around sacred practices was done for millennia. We have lost it, but we are just basically returning to these practices. So I think there's nothing new here. Expanding consciousness is part of the human experience that we all ought to explore one way or the other. And if we don't do entheogens or psychedelics, which is totally valid if someone doesn't feel like this is part of their access, or there's too much fear, or there's not safe, or, you know, there's different reasons why, you know, they do meditation, do dancing, they do rituals, they do breath work, they do expressive arts, they do all kinds of other things that are contemplation in nature. You know, they do different practices that bring people into an expanded state. Basically, we have our normal states of consciousness, we will call it, our ego structure. The way we think and the way we feel who we are is what we are, right? I mean, we have a certain experience of our human experience. And when we provide ourselves a different framework where we can have access to a bigger picture, either because we're quiet, or because we're moving our body, or because we are in a sweat lodge, or because we're in a sacred ceremony with medicine. We access other layers of our possible potential of human experience. And I think that those are very beneficial. Those are adding to the richness of our human life, the richness of our emotions, of a spiritual dimension, access to what it's like to be in community, or what it's like to be in nature. It really adds to our human experience. It gives us a lot of clarity to what we feel, why we feel what we feel, where in our body we feel what we feel, what is it connected to, and how to express it, and how to, like I said in the book, how to circulate these energies that are part of our human experience. So I believe that expanded states are really part of our menu, just like we feel meditation is part of our menu, right? People meditate, or people go to Chinese medicine now. This is part of a, sort of part of a accepted health practice, right? Or people do yoga because it's part of a repertoire. And I feel like expanded state of consciousness are part of this human repertoire as well.
Oh, beautiful. Amazing. I love that. I love the word menu, and you're right. And we look at the society that we're in now, and so many people, we caught in a pattern, and we've stopped experimenting with different ways of things, but also the interaction with nature, and also art, speaking about art, going out in nature, using your body in different ways. We're kind of devaluing that and valuing other things. And then we get out of whack. We feel out of whack. We feel out of control, and we feel disconnected. And these practices are very simple. Go in nature, even if you suck at art, and go paint something. It's okay that it sucks. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And it's a part of these practices, and it's a part of the menu, but it's also good for the soul, and it makes you feel better. And it also, even sometimes with expanded states or altered states, it can just be as simple as what I've been referring to it as task list consciousness. You wake up and you have all these things that you need to do. And so the mind is on the hamster wheel all day. And so we don't do anything that gets us off the hamster wheel. So do anything that gets you off the hamster wheel. Run, sprint for 30 seconds. You'll be off it because you'll be tired, and you're probably, if you haven't run in a long time, you'll be gasping. That'll trigger outside of that general path, and that thing's going to be known, and it's going to be in this box, and you're not going to get other information in it. So I really enjoyed that answer. And what I'm curious about now is, what did you see, being around these indigenous cultures, several different cultures, what did you see was the biggest differences as far as, daily life, their beliefs, their habits, or their understanding of life? Like, what were the biggest differences you saw in how they lived and what they believed, and how they acted, and how maybe our Western society is believing and acting and doing?
These indigenous cultures always, to me, felt like they have a much better relationship with the sacred. What is sacred? What is ritual? They're much calmer. They're much less stressed. They're less cognitively hyperactive, like you said. It's like a hamster in a wheel. They're much less busy in their mind, and they're much more grounded in their body, in the land, and in time. The time slows down for them. They're much less busy than we are. And they take the time. I mean, the Mazatec people are known for, going to a healer and sitting on a bench for 4 hours before the healer is ready. And they sit there, and they don't have any idea of, I'm wasting my time, or I'm not important for that healer. They just sit and wait. It's a very different concept. And we are so, as we know in the West, or in the realized world, most precious commodity time. Right? And we are, imagine how much stress we load on ourselves with the notion of relationship with time. And I look at my appointment book, and I'm certainly, I can relate to that concept of time being really precious, So, but for indigenous people, I find that they're much more in sync with nature, and they're much more in sync with cycles and time, and things are stretching, and they don't have to be anywhere at a certain time. There's a different relationship with time. That's just what comes to me as you ask this question, which I think is really relevant for how we could learn to slow down and appreciate the moment, right? And then the relationship with nature, of course. I mean, most indigenous people have more contact with the ground, either because they farm the land or because they have a sacred practice that involves ingesting a substance, or because, like in my book, I talk about the Lakota tradition that I've been lucky to be invited to participate in. And then, you build a sweat lodge, you sit in nature, you contemplate, a few hours, the tree in front of you. I mean, it's taking the time to be in nature and to pray and to be in a state of listening. They're better listener. And they listen to subtlety and to the silence better than we do. We make a lot of noise and we are very busy and we don't have time. Right? I mean, this is kind of in a nutshell, this is us, right? This is us. So, yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, I love hearing, your answers, because I've been studying with a Mi'kmaq elder for a couple of years. And, I know Clifford Mahudi as well. We haven't been as close, but I've been able to talk to him here and there and learn more from him in the Zuni culture and, the way,
Great.
How his upbringing was and how it's different. And so some of my training that I have to do, or the recommendations, are different. And so one of them is forest, going for runs in the forest at night, which is terrifying. Even in city parks is absolutely terrifying. As an adult man who knows martial arts, I am totally freaked out. I'm getting better now, especially when I was doing it in Nelson, British Columbia, where there's cougars and bears. I was like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. But I think that's what reminded me of a lot of noise, because I was so freaked out. He's just like, don't worry, you're the noisiest one in there. You're the one who's so out of place because you're freaked out. You got to learn how to integrate into that space, and you got to learn how to relax, and you got to learn how this is almost your natural state. We're so far removed from living in nature. It's like, I can't remember what it was. I think it was a buddy of mine posted something and he was upset about the birds. You know what I mean? I was like, what are they supposed to do, bro? They're in your environment. You're upset they're on the building. You're in nature. You are immersed in nature. What do you want to happen? And we're so separate. As Joe Martino, I've recently found out from Collective Evolution, he has a thing about containers. We're in the container of our house, then we're in the container of our car, and he could go on forever about containers. But we go to these really, curated spaces.
Yes.
Rather than the natural spaces.
That's right.
And there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of, we're not valuing that. So I guess what were some of your biggest insights or your favorite experiences, whether it was a ceremony that you got an insight, or you just enjoyed the experience, or a ritual, or anything like that? Do you have any favorite stories that come to mind?
Well, when you said that, it's the story about the bird. It was really funny because when I was first going to Mexico, I would hear the dogs barking. There was dogs, there was dogs everywhere, stray dogs in the streets and in the mountain everywhere. And I would be there in my ceremony, high up in my mushroom layer, and really kind of in communion with things. And I would hear these dogs and they would bother me. Hell, they would really bother me. I said, God, these dogs and, these dogs, and I remember really being irritated, seriously irritated. Meanwhile, my teacher was singing and praying. I mean, nothing phased her, phased her. It was like, okay, well, the dogs are there. They're part of the landscape. And for me, they were super irritated. And so then fast forward a few years, I'm back there. I went back many, many times, but I was, again, in a journey, and I found myself having the dogs barking as they do every night. And I loved them. I love them. I felt like, oh, they're talking to each other, and that one is over there in the other village, and that one is over there on top of the mountain. And it was like the landscape, the mountain, and the sound of the mountain was part of what they were doing, and it was actually a very different experience. And I was wondering, what is inside me that is so different, really. In this Native American tradition where nature is really so potent and so holy and so deep in terms of their teaching, I have, sat in nature for hours, or I have been in sweat lodges for hours and very uncomfortable. And yet at the same time, potency, immediacy of the teaching. Part of being in nature is, I totally agree. Running in the night in the forest sounds like a really fabulous thing to do. And for me, it's been more for me about stillness, because I move a lot. So for me, stillness is kind of my healing modality, and being still with a question in a spot in nature, in a kind of a visual quest. I mean, however that is, the contemplation and the listening again to answer has been extremely important for me. And it can be from watching a spider make a web, which is, you know, on one hand, not like super exceptional. On the other hand, it's totally exceptional. And it totally is a trance if you stay with it, you know, long enough to watch it, and the metaphor that it is for life, and how it talks about my life. You know, what am I weaving? What is my patience? What is my capacity to repair when a thread is broken? What is my capacity to catch the light, or, you know, so listening to what nature answers to our quest, our, you know, questions, our prayers, our wishes. I found that always very, very meaningful. I remember once being in a kind of contemplative space in nature like that, with my teacher. We were on the land in Mexico, and she had me sit in one place, and she said, "Okay, lay down." And so I lay down. And I looked down on the ground, and there was one little bug climbing a blade of grass. I mean, okay, so I'm altered on mushroom, right? I mean, not very much, but I'm altered on mushroom, because that's the ceremony, right? That's what the space she provides for me. In that case, it was just her and I. And I'm looking at this bug climbing this blade of grass, and it was the human predicament. She was climbing this blade of grass, and she was falling, and she was climbing again, and the blade would bend, and then she would fly out, and then she would land in another blade of grass, and then start all over again. And it was like an illustration of my meandering in my human life. I found so much solace and so much resonance and so much sweetness in seeing my life in this bag. It was really my life that I was seeing in a nutshell. And everybody's life, I guess, in some way. I mean, you know, we are human trying to do something, and, you know, failing, or I don't know, having hurdles and obstacles, and then we kind of reboot, and then we start again, and like that, right? So those moments of insights and of teachings are really very precious, and very not only they're amazing because they're wonderful moments of wonder, really, and extraordinary insight, but they are also very sweet and very accessible. And that's what I like about what nature offers us. You know, everything is there. Every aspect of nature is a mirror for something inside us. And the indigenous people really know that, and they use that. Not only they use nature for their health and their balance and their, you know, doctoring of themselves, but they are in relationship with nature for what nature reflects back.
That's wonderful. It seems that there's a few themes here that are really great, and one of them is reflection. One of them is getting involved and connected to nature, and then the other is the idea and the perception that everything is spiritual. Everything is has a spirit that is alive, that we're a part of, and that we're engaging in it. Because if you look at the natural world, it is alive and living, but then you look at the world, the Western world, we're looking at the TV screens, our phones, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of like the dead world, and we're spending more time in this artificial reality than out there, reflecting and engaging. It's like, who has 4 hours to wait for anything? Who has 5 minutes, depending on what city you go in. And when I was doing coaching, it was always interesting. Well, I still do coaching, but I found it interesting when I work with somebody from New York, and the way that they think. And then somebody who is like, because I also work with athletes and snowboarders and things like that. And so the snowboard culture and how they've designed their life, somebody who wants to be out in nature versus the hustle and bustle of a city, the psychology is so different.
Yes.
And like that, the person in the city can, in 20 minutes, but, somebody closer to nature, whether it's snowboarding or skiing, we're like, yeah, that's where we want to be. We're using it. We're engaging it in a different way, but that's the space that we want to be in. What I'd love to ask you is, you have a somatic psychology degree, and I'm curious with what you've learned, maybe you can explain that a little bit to people, but it looks like on one end of our culture, a lot of people are suffering from anxiety and depression, and also is very common. I was looking up one of Bruce Lipton's talks, and he said when he surveys his audience, 80 to 90% say they don't love themselves.
Yeah.
It's a, you know, and so when we're
Yeah.
looking at things from like the bottom layer,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we move up to, okay, we're out of the bottom layer now. Now we're in the empowered layer, and we want to imagine our lives, and we want to feel good and happy, and we want to build our dreams, and we want to live in an empowered state. So from what you've learned on the psychology perspective, and also, you know, the indigenous cultures, what can you offer people of like, why are we like this? How do we break those limiting beliefs about ourselves and be in an empowered state, and then, and move toward, you know, pursuing what we like, building
Yes.
our dreams, and having a happy life?
Yes. Well, that's great. That's a great question. You know, thank you for asking it. I think that this is what has been interesting for me, because these expanded states of consciousness are really bringing people into a larger dimension. And then there is our psychology, you know. So we go into those states generally for the adventure of it and for the curiosity, and because we can, you know, and because it offers a layer that is interesting and mysterious. But we also go there because there is something in us that is not well. A lot of people come in my office, you know, or I've come in my trips to Mexico, because they say, you know, something's wrong with me. I'm stuck. I have this wrong belief system, or have this childhood that created this heaviness in me, or I'm depressed, or I have this anxiety. I'm always kind of anxious and worried about everything. And generally, that's where the psychology comes handy. It is not a coincidence. There is a background. There is a foundational layer from childhood, from circumstances, cultural, the country in which people live, the religious environment sometimes may have been really intense, the family environment, of course, what happened there, or the school environment, or the sport environment, and those different containers have impacted the person on a psychological level and create belief systems. And the Hakomi therapy practice is interesting because it's a therapy modality that explores how people hold their tension, their belief, their emotions, and their hopes on a physical level. So people track from a state of mindfulness what really is the body saying, what really is the body stopping, what is the body containing or blocking or compressing, right? And what is the body wanting to say? And so I really like that method because it's a direct read into the way we organize our emotions, physically, somatically. And when people come to me and they want to explore expanded states, I'm saying, okay, why? What's happening in your life? What is your intelligence regarding the state of affairs? You know, what is the lay of the land inside yourself? What is your what is your territory? You know, and they say, well, you know, I have that issue. I'm strong there, but I have that issue. You know, that's why in my book I have this holistic model. You know, with all these different aspects that people can explore, so they see where is the pain. You know, where is the loneliness? Where is the what is the depression about? What is this anxiety really saying? And by examining that from a psychological therapeutic angle, we can then form an intention. We can form a direction for these expanded states. We can then have a goal. I mean, it's not a goal like, you know, we're gonna, you know, it's not. I mean, I like to call it a goal because that's a vision and that's a hope for the future, right? We can define what do we want 5 years from now, you know, what do we want 2 years from now? That's legitimate, but it's more like a wish. It's more like a direction, an intention, an orientation for the work, for the growth, and so yeah, the expanded states of consciousness based on the psychological understanding is offering this transformation of belief system. They can be transformed. Belief systems don't have to be stagnant. They don't have to be rigid. And you know what I said in the book, calcified. You know, they don't have to be that way. They can change.
Wow. Okay. Well, you said a lot there. My mind was going all over the place. I just finished reading. I read it a while ago, but I kind of refreshed on Maxwell Malta's book,
Mm-hmm.
Psycho-Cybernetics, and I
Mm-hmm.
really think it's a fantastic book. And a lot of the stuff that I read on psychology, you know, Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Maxwell Maltz, personal development, law of attraction, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about the unconscious mechanism, our subconscious
Right.
mind, our subconscious thoughts,
Right.
and beliefs. And the way that he calls it, it's like the servo mechanism. It's like this thing inside you that's going to help you create, you know, what your unconscious beliefs are. And when you were talking about, it's like almost it becomes the goal, you know.
Yep.
What are you striving towards? But the very beginning has to be an introspection. And that's
Yes.
what we're not doing. We're not just analyzing. And
That's right.
even if we can write it down and get it on paper, and then,
That's right.
you know, express it through art, express it through
That's right.
writing. Doesn't matter
That's right.
what it is. You
That's right.
sit by a tree and ask the tree, and then think about it for an hour, right? But what happens is we give it absolutely zero time. Not a little bit of time, not 10 minutes, and we want this quick fix, and then we want some medication or a pill that's going to help us feel better.
Yep.
And we're wondering why we're so off track, but we're not
Right.
taking the time to converse with ourselves, to have a dialogue, to sit, to listen, to engage with our body, and then also to listen to it and just
right.
have this dialogue. I think it's a very important part of life that people, you know, a lot of the time aren't valuing or aren't giving time to, just like maybe we're not giving enough time to our health. Maybe we're not giving enough time to other things. Go ahead.
Well, exactly. No, I mean, I'm just totally, yeah, absolutely. And you know, when you say that, what comes to me is if you want to love yourself, you have to know yourself. And if you want to know yourself, you got to spend time with yourself. You know, you got to write in your journal, you got to sit, you got to look at yourself in the mirror. You have to, you know, like in the book, you know, do your little inventory and see what's going on with you. You know, if you spend the time to be with yourself, you know, there's going to be things you like, things you don't like, things you want to change, things you want to pay attention to. There's going to be a younger part of you that maybe is in pain, and you're going to, you know, kind of talk to your inner tribe, talk to the different aspects of you, and that leads to love. That leads to self-love. But if you're right, if we don't spend the time to be with ourselves, then what do we love? What do we love if we don't know who we are? You know, and the self-knowing is very, very important. Yeah, I mean, this is the basis, right? And that's kind of why, you know, it's interesting that the idea of psychology and the idea of expanded states all lead to the same thing. It all leads to who are we, what are we doing here, and why? Why are we here? What am I doing here? Right? What is my purpose? What can I manifest? What is my potential? How do I contribute? And that comes from knowing oneself.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that additional rant at the end. So I'm just curious, when I believe the same thing essentially, and what would you say, what have you come to for those big questions? You know, like, who are we? What are we doing here? What is the meaning? Have you come to any kind of resolve on that, or any kind of even general direction that you could offer to people?
Yeah, it's a personal philosophy. So I'm not saying I'm preaching anything here, because that's kind of what I've come to touch in myself and to believe. But again, I'm not saying, you know, I'm preaching or bestowing any, imposing any personal insight here. I do believe that we come in this human form from a vast cosmic energy field to learn what it's like to be human, which is complicated and which includes suffering and great joy and great complicated emotional turmoil, as well as great peacefulness. We learn to exchange and be in relationship with each other. So the purpose of incarnating, if I may use this word, of coming to be a human being, choosing to come, you know, is to experience human life. And experience human life through our body and through our heart. And I think that the core of the thing is love. Not love like romantic love, I'm falling in love, but the capacity to see the other as ourselves, the capacity to have compassion for suffering, both in ourselves and in others, and be able to go beyond our emotional self, emotional experience, to have compassion for another person. And I think that the ultimate gift of that we give ourselves as human being is to be able to know compassion. Again, I'm not talking about bypassing emotions. I'm talking about real love, really real empathy, real seeing that the other's suffering is the same as my suffering, because I know my suffering, and I know my joy, and I know my capacity, and I know my wonder and my rapture, right? I'm not just about suffering, but the compassion, meaning being with the other, right? Having passion with, right? And so I think that as human beings, that's what I found in my personal exploration. Again, my own personal view, that we are coming here to really experience what it's like to be together and be amongst other people that basically look like us, and create bond and create compassion.
That's beautiful. I love that answer. Alan Watts gives a similar answer. I think he's like, the purpose of life is just to be alive. It's so simple that,
Right.
you know, we're
That's
not
right.
even, yeah, we're
But
just
you know,
complicated.
being alive is very complicated when you think of
Mm,
it. I mean, you know, the physical experience, people who are ill, people who are disabled, people who are, you know, there's a lot of pain sometimes in the body, or people who have mental disability or difficult in relationship because they are wounded. You know, it's being a human, being alive is wonderful, yes, and it's also complex, you know. And so do we say yes to, you know, the point of being here is to say yes to life in all its form. And
mm.
yeah, Alan Watts is right. Being alive, and being alive is a big menu again, right? It's a big menu. There's a lot of beautiful things. There's a lot of challenging aspects of being alive, and that's why we say yes to everything.
Beautiful. And what have you learned, or what can you offer in the sense of finding purpose and meaning? You know, would some of the ritual stuff that you've learned help? Do you have any specific tools or techniques or processes that really helped you, or you really enjoyed the experience that somebody could engage in?
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's funny you said that, because very soon I'm about to put this online course, and give people some techniques and practices to do actually in the course, so they can start to be in touch with these different aspects. So I'm right there with you. You know, I feel like what's been really meaningful for me is expressive arts, is painting, is making things, is arranging aspects of nature in my house, bringing flowers or wildflowers or grasses. It doesn't have to be involving money at all. Bringing nature into my house and has been really important, as well as going in nature, of course, but I'm talking about that now. The creative aspect of life, writing poetry, singing, painting. Intuitive painting is a really good practice for being in touch with oneself, and it's educative. Um, Anything that has to do with silence, really good. Like I said earlier, you know, so busy and we're so busy. Having anything contemplative, meditating, sitting by a tree, having a cup of tea, and being just with my tea. You know, the process of being in one moment, doing only one thing at a time. We are very, very multitasker, and that's a problem in our society. I think that writing in a journal is a very good practice for me. Sort of tracking my experience of being human, what is happening in my heart, what is emotionally challenging for me when I go through something. Reaching out to friends is a really important thing, not staying isolated, not feeling ashamed of what I feel, and really leaning on friendships and family members or community to help me hold my process if I feel like I'm, you know, fragile. Allowing my fragility to be part of my life and feeling supported. So reaching out to friends, being able to talk about what's happening. You know, sometimes it's just, hey, I want to take a walk with you. I'm just feeling a little gloomy. And it doesn't have to be like I'm, you know, telling my story for 2 hours. And sometimes it is really, I need to go to see my therapist or my spiritual, you know, consultant, or, you know, my coach, or someone to kind of hear me out. So again, having a way to tend to these different aspects of life in a way that, feels good. Doing yoga or going to walk or going to climb, climbing walls is a very good practice for young people. I mean, I used to do that a lot, wall climbing, because there is something about, it's a metaphor for reaching the height, for climbing, for feeling strong in your body, for being able to reach something. There's something very symbolic there. Swimming, being in water is a very good practice for people who, depending on where you live, but immersing yourself in water is very cleansing. If you bring your attention to it and you say, I'm bathing and I'm flushing out everything I don't want right now, and I'm kind of purifying my body, I'm immersing myself, can be very meaningful. So you can do it for fun, you can do it for exercise, and you can do it for meaning. We're bringing a little spiritual angle to it, ritualistic angle to anything we do, really. I can roll on the floor for my body, or I can feel like I'm lying on the floor and feeling the earth under me. It's all a matter of what I want to do with that practice.
At the end there, I thought that was an interesting point, is the meaning we attach to it, right? Like nothing that happens to us outside in our reality has any meaning. It's only the meaning that we attach to it. And I remember reading, I think it was one of Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, but when they told, it was a study that they did with house cleaners at hotels, and when they told them how many calories they burned, they started to perceive it as a workout, and so they ended up actually getting fitter and stronger, and it improved their health considerably. And so I think, like with the ritual and kind of with that rolling on the ground, and if we can create empowering frames around what we do and attach an empowering meaning.
That's right.
Even if it's mundane, I think that's a huge shift in the way that we would explore living, right? Because some people have everything and it's never good enough. And I was complaining today, I think, about a first world problem. I think I was doing something, I was like, oh God, that's a first world problem. It is annoying, but it's a first world problem for sure. And so, how we frame things and see it more ritualistic, more spiritual, more meaning in our own way, whatever that is. And even if you have to kind of fake it at first to kind of find it, I think you can kind of grow towards that idea more.
Absolutely. There was a bumper sticker. I was just talking to my my students recently, and I said, there's a bumper sticker I read years ago that says, do it out of duty until you do it out of love. So basically, I owe to myself, sit for 5 minutes and meditate, because it's good for me, because it calms my mind, because it stops me in my rat race. It's good for me. I must do it. I don't like it. I don't want it. I don't have time for it. I do it. And then after a week, 2 weeks, I said, I really love sitting for myself. I start to love it because I feel the benefit of it. I feel the ripple effect in my life. I feel how it touches all these different aspects. And I believe I start to love it. I believe it's good for me. And first, I didn't like it. And I was doing it just out of duty because I felt, I'm going to get a heart attack. I'm too stressed. Whatever, it's my doctor told me to meditate, or something. Right. And it became really something that was pleasurable and was a sign of self-love. I do it for myself and I enjoy it. And I see how good it is for me. And pretty soon it's at this positive loop, right? Instead of being, okay, I'll do it. It becomes this like, I want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And, we only have a little bit of time left, and I want to shift gears because I'm curious your perspective on this. I spent the last 2 years learning from a Mi'kmaq Native American, David Lombear Senepass, and I've met a lot of Native Americans, more than most people I know. I'm definitely no expert, but I'm curious. And also went to the Parliament of World Religions. I met a lot more cultures, some of the other cultures, and got to hear their perspective on a lot of different things. And what I'm curious about from where you are today and what you've learned from what I've studied is Westerners came over, whatever, and, the school systems came in for Native Americans. We wiped out most language. We did horrible things. And I'm not saying like the white people, whatever you want to say, that absolutely horrible things. If you want to take away a culture, you got to take their language and you take their kids. And we did both of those things, and it's awful. And now they're suffering consequences from this. And a lot of the people, even Clifford said, none of the kids want to learn the language, some of the history that he can't even pass it down now. And then they're going to lose a lot of their history. And what I learned from Clifford, what I learned from David, and what I learned from Carlos Barrios, who's a Mayan elder, is that their history was oral, and that a lot of these cultures, a lot of these traditions were passed on. And, you know, whoever come, like the Whiteys or North America or Europeans, destroyed that. And so what do you think that we can do now in America and Canada to, I don't know what the word is for it, it's not cultural appropriation, but like mend this, like empower all Native American cultures in Canada and US and around the world today? Is there anything that you see that we could do to start bridging that gap, to empower their culture, to refine all the things that we've kind of maybe not supported so much, language and culture and all that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. You know, I was just listening today about on the radio that, you know, the white American culture has never apologized for slavery to this day. You know, for my country in France, the French government never apologized for colonizing Africa and basically destroying the culture there. You know, I know that in Canada, I was in Vancouver recently. I was told that it's only in 1980 that the tribal people could stay in their tribe, that the kids were not forced to go in school, in white school. In 1980, I mean, right? This is very recent. Only now in Australia did the government publicly apologize to the Aboriginal people. Just now, right? Just now. So we are not very advanced as a white culture to understand, and even here with African American, you know, descendant of slaves, how to mend, how to own, be accountable for what has happened. If there was dialogue, if there were people, you know, like you talking to a, you know, like you do with a Mayan elder or Lakota elder, and you said, what can I do? I feel like, you know, my culture has a responsibility. I bet that they would say, okay, you being here is already a bridge. You being here, inviting a dialogue, entering consciously a dialogue with Native people is the way the next generations are going to heal. So I think that there is a matter of acknowledgement, a matter of, you know, people of this new generation that you are, and, you know, me doing this kind of bridging, we can bring, you know, acknowledgement to what has happened. I think that's the first thing. We cannot just help without looking at the past. It's very hard to go forward without acknowledging what has happened. So we don't have to, you know, I mean, we can be very, very contrite, and we can be very, very sorry for our ancestors as white people for what has happened to the indigenous world or the African American people here. But I think that the first thing is to really say, I'm sorry. On behalf of my ancestors, I'm sorry, right? And I wish to help now. I'm this younger person with a more open mind. I'm not here to oppress you. I might oppress you without even thinking I'm oppressing you, because I don't even know how to not oppress. You know, I'm almost learned to be a white privileged guy, you know, or a woman, right? I don't even know what it's like to not be that. But I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to receive. What is it you need from me? What do you need from me? How can I help you, right? So a lot of the time, the Western culture or the industrial culture or the white culture, or whatever, the First Nation, the modern culture, wants to help, but they don't really hear what the need is. You know, what do the indigenous people really want emotionally, spiritually, the respect they need spiritually, the collective support that we can bring to them by helping them revive their, helping them, serving them in the way they want to revive their knowledge of herbal healing or sacred ritual that they want to, continue to practice. How do we serve them? I just came back from Mexico to from a wonderful place. Some friends of mine have a beautiful retreat center, and in Mexico they host Lakota Sundance. And the Lakota people come down from Lakota to be in their land, to have all people from South America coming. And my friends are Mexican people, and they're hosting. My land is your land. You host your dance here. You host whatever you want. I'm offering my land to you. And for me, that's repair. For me, that's how we start to mend the pain and to support them. When I go to Mexico, I've been always supporting the education of the children, the health of the people there. I, of course, leave economy there by virtue of going there with my people. But further than that, I'm really trying to see what's needed in the family or other people in the town. What do they need? How do they? How can I serve them? And I wait for them to tell me. I mean, right now I'm sponsoring a kid of the grandson of my teacher, to go to school, and I pay for his room and for his food and for his uniform. He's in university, and I feel really good. I mean, he doesn't have the resources. And for me, I mean, I don't have to repair much because I don't know, this is not quite oppression towards them. It hasn't been a personal thing, but it feels that that's the right thing to do. That's the right thing to do, and for me, when I work with my Lakota teacher, she always says, the fact that you're here and you're open to learn and to receive a wisdom from another culture is the way this wisdom stays alive. It stays alive through you, through what you're going to do about it, how you're going to speak, the wisdom of the stone or the fire or the lodge, how precious it's going to be for you. And you carry that in your life. And she says, I said, how can I help? She said, you are helping. You're coming to the lodge. That's help. That's participating. And you're not taking it away and doing something with it or showing off with it. You're coming for yourself. Right? And by receiving the teachings, we are helping them. But we have to listen and we have to receive. We have to stop wanting to do things. We have to wait until they tell us what they want from us. I think that's part of the eagerness to help and do and accomplish stuff can be, again, another takeover, another takeover. So I think we have to be working on their timeline with their way, that is different, again, time-wise. Right?
Well, there are a lot of great points there. And I think the biggest one is opening a dialogue.
Yes.
And a dialogue with as many people, with as many organizations, and as open as possible. And,
that's right.
And to actually listen. And really brilliant way to say is ask, what is it that you need? How can we make this right? And it's really interesting thing. Like I had Brian Francis on, who's now in the Parliament in Canada. And, you look at the treaties that we signed when they came here, and apparently they had a really great relationship with the French. They were cool with the French, until the British came over and then frigged it all up, and that was the whole thing. But every treaty the British government broke. So, they're on land. There's no borders. There's no taxes. There's no nothing. They broke every single treaty. So every time we go to court by our own system, we're breaking our own laws, but it's totally cool. It's only for however this institution, whoever's benefiting from the institutions that have been created, from Europe or whatever, then that's fine. Those bankers and those politics, they're all winning, but they're breaking their own rules from their own treaties. They've all been broken. And so just opening a dialogue, it's something horrible that I don't think that we can sweep under the rug. I think that the conversations need to be had, and they're going to be challenging, and there's no easy solution. And it's something that a responsible group of people, because they're conquerors, you know what I mean? It's like a conquering. It's not okay. And we're better than that now. And we know more, we shouldn't have slavery. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. And and slowly it got a little bit better as people got smarter and more compassionate and willing to listen and had, people engaging in those difficult dialogues and then making change. And I think that that's what we need to do. We need to have those conversations.
Absolutely. And, this is a big conversation I've had with my teacher and now with the children of my teacher. Like, okay, so they have this very sacred tradition of the mushrooms, very held for millennia as a sacred ceremony there. There's nobody plays with mushrooms there, right? Very, very sacred, very well done, held very deeply. And now here we are, the mushrooms are everywhere, right? And how do we not extract these mushrooms, and put them in the society, and now everybody's like shrooming around and going to parties and this and that, and for them, this is really stealing their sacred medicine and playing with it, and this is the ultimate sacrilegious, really insult, right? This is like their insult for them, right? I mean,
yeah,
and
that kind of thing there too, because I was in that world, you know what I mean? And I didn't really kind of, I did it here and there, and I found the experiences valuable, but I also treated it very respectfully. And it was a very special thing for me to do this thing and want to have the insights and do it for meaning.
Sure.
And a lot of the time I could observe in festivals and different spaces, how they're being used in different things. And it can be a lot of fun, but like a psychedelic at Burning Man is a heck of a lot of fun.
I know. I've been there. I've been there. I've been there. I love it. The thing is like this. Again, what's the intentionality? If the intentionality is to take something and be at Burning Man and watch the burn, and that's what we want to do, and that's the purpose of what we do, it's okay. If we, what is the meaning of here? What is the ritual here? Because everything is a ritual. I mean, we don't have to be so serious about having ritual. We can dance and have a great ritual. It doesn't have to be somber and kind of solemn and, it's so serious, but to have intentionality. And if I take mushroom in Mexico when I'm in my teacher, or on the land, and this is a communion with the land and with spirit, it's valid too. So, it's just what we do and how we aware of what we do when we do it is the key here, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what I was going to say. And you said it in great words, so I don't even need to repeat it, because there is an opportunity with those things, especially, their capability and their potency and a lot of the kind of side that isn't as beneficial is just doing it and then no integration. It's like, this is just to have an experience, but when it's done, I'm not going to reflect. I'm not going to do anything that I've learned. And that was kind of one of the bummers for me when I was doing ayahuasca and seeing a lot of people going through those experiences, is the integration was super minimal. And over time, over a lot of the people that I know have done these things, experimented, it seems like they can still be a little bit stuck. And if we add in that understanding, that intention, that honest intention that comes from you, you can do it in all these different ways. And then you can really find meaning and really find spirit. And that's the whole thing. Everything that the indigenous cultures are doing is involved around spirit, nature, connection with something bigger. And it's important and it's sacred. And so I think that's important to bring into those.
Well, and you bring a very good point. I mean, one of the essential point of all this dialogue, or a lot of my mission or in the book, is the integration. Why do we go to a Sundance? Because we go back to our community with a sense of the sacred, with a sense of what it's like to be in community, with a sense of mutual support. That's really valuable. Why do we do a mushroom journey in Mexico? Because we come out with a deeper understanding of the divine inside us, or our emotional turmoil being forgiven or held in compassion. I mean, and then we do something with this, right? What do we do with this? How do we bring to concreteness all this wonderful pieces of information or insight, or resolution, right? This is, to know something and not do anything with it. Well, it's kind of there hanging, The idea for us human being is those rites of passages, those rituals, those initiation really help us be better human beings, right? For ourselves and for others. So the integration process is really something I've been very passionate about, because I believe this is where the rubber meets the road. This is really where it proves itself to be valuable. Otherwise, it's an experience, it's a moment, it's a ritual, and it's valid. But how does it serve our life and our community and our relationship with nature? That's really where it needs to be concretized. It needs to be acted.
Well, I 100% agree. I know you got to run, so
yes.
I would love to keep asking a whole bunch of questions, but I'll just ask, is there anything that you wish that I'd asked you or you'd like to speak on before I let you go? And where can people find more about you if they want to dive deeper into your work?
Thank you, Matt. No, I think this discussion was very, very important for me, actually, in a way that, it was not so much about psychedelic or not psychedelic. It was more about the ritual and what our society is really looking for. What is the medicine for the illness of our world? And I really appreciate your question. I think they were very right on, good direction for, food for thoughts. Definitely. No, I think it was great. If people want to look at my work, my website is down right now, but that's going to be fixed any minute now. And they can find me at FRANÇOISEBOURZA.com. And I have some music there that I've composed through ceremony. I have the book. I have another book of poetry. I have my online course coming up and other events that I'm doing, Portland, New York, and various places for the book, as well as for presentation about my ideas like I did today with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for your
thank
work.
You so much.
I appreciate you sharing, and I look forward to staying in touch. So
yeah, and good luck to you. Wonderful show, and all the best. All the best to you, Matt. Okay.
Thank you so much. See everybody. Have a great night.